Hello again, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Rob.
And I'm David.
And we're Sharegiver Solutions. In our last episode, we spoke about mindset, which is an enormous topic and one that cannot be covered in one podcast. And everything else we talk about involves mindset, because that's how you approach your situation. But today we're going to speak about the second element of the Sharegiver Solutions plan, which is Gameplan. And Gameplan is a long-term approach as well as a short-term approach to caring. And it involves a game plan toward providing the best care for your partner as well as the best care for yourself. So, David, let's get into it.
Okay.
How do you formulate a game plan?
Yeah, so we think of it as a game plan almost like you would, when you're planning, a competition, going in with a game plan, going in with an idea of what you want to accomplish, how you're going to do it, and what are the tools that you need to do that. So, and we think of this as not as a game, but as something that requires a strategy, because at the end of the day, the caregiver wants to be successful. He wants to be successful in the care he's providing. He wants to be successful in his own life. While being a caregiver, he wants to flourish as he would doing anything. So let's break it down, the way we think about creating a game plan. The first thing I would say, as an exercise, it'll be abbreviated here, but we can go into it in more detail later on, but is identifying sort of an operating framework, a belief framework for the caregiver. What defines success for the caregiver? It's a question worth looking at. What is my purpose in doing this, and what would be really important to achieve if I'm successful in
To
it?
stay with the game metaphor, how do you win?
Yeah. What is a win? What are the key elements that constitute a win? And once you can identify those, then what enables that? What do you need in order to win, in order to execute successfully that strategy? What are the preconditions for that? And then you can organize yourself to make sure you have those things that would enable you. What are failure factors? What are the kind of things that would cause you to fail, not succeed in that strategy? And similarly, what are the key success elements that, could almost assure that you're going to be successful?
And it seems to me that the long-term game plan doesn't change much over the course of the care, because you still want your partner to have the highest quality of life, and you want your own life to be as enriched as it can be. But in the short term, from a day-to-day standpoint, week to week, month to month, I would think your game plan depends largely on where you are in the arc of this disease and treatment.
Right. So, which is a great point. So first, we're sort of establishing the basis for a strategy for that game plan. And by the way, as we all know, if you do have a strategy, if you've thought it through and what's important in order to be successful, you feel like you're more likely to be successful. It brings its own confidence. The second thing, as you mentioned, is understanding the situation. To be effective as a caregiver, you need to have some understanding of the condition of your partner. You don't need to be a scientist, and goodness knows this is a disease, dementia in its various forms, that has defied a cure and is obviously very complex. But it behooves the caregiver to know as much as he or she can about the condition, which means talking to your partner's primary care physician, If there's a neurologist that's been involved or a therapist, talking to them with permission, which is another thing that you should make sure that you are legally able to find out confidential information about your partner, which means having a directive or having a power of attorney, and that's another subject we'll get to. But so you want to understand as much as you can about the condition of your partner, what is the path that he or she is on.
And incidentally, for our listeners, these first few podcasts are essentially conversations between David and me about his situation and the situation 16 million other people find themselves in. But David's a voracious reader. He's got a stack of books written by experts from all different aspects of dementia care, and we will be presenting many of these people as guests on this podcast. But this is just and it was still in the introductory stage of what Sharegiver Solutions is about.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of knowledge that we hope to tap, all with the focus of empowering and enabling the sharegiver to be most effective. So back on Gameplan, first you're going to learn as much as you can about the condition. You're going to have talked to legal, medical, financial representatives that are providing some form of assistance or support to your partner so that you have a good awareness of a snapshot of the condition. And then you're going to construct out of that, having done your own sort of self-analysis and an analysis of your partner's condition, you're going to create a game plan. And that game plan, I think of it most easily as a whiteboard that I actually have, as you know, in my mudroom downstairs that Barbara never tires of looking at, which down the right side of it will have all of the things that I want to refer to as I'm designing an activity plan, and that is intellectual, social, emotional, spiritual, physical, dietary, things that I want to keep in mind. And
now, I'm sure I've seen the whiteboard. I looked at it last week. I know the whiteboard today bears little resemblance to the whiteboard as it initially was created
years
by
ago,
you.
Sure.
So as succinctly as you can, talk about how that whiteboard has changed, why it's changed, and maybe the whiteboard we see now reflects activities that you're interested in that Barbara can enjoy, as opposed to originally activities Barbara was interested in that you could enjoy.
It's a great question. How has it changed from years ago? Because I've been doing this probably for 5 years.
When did you start doing it? I mean,
I would say that I started doing it about 3 years ago. Yeah, right after we got back from a healing trip to Peru, which was interesting in itself. And the reason that's the line of demarcation is that no sooner did we get back that Barbara had a bad fall, fractured 2 bones in her sacrum, and ended up in rehab for almost 5 weeks. And when she came out of that, she suffered a significant change, which some attribute to a phenomenon called, hospital delirium, where after a stay like that, the disorientation is so significant that for some people that are then predisposed, it's permanently disorienting. And I think that's what happened to Barbara, very sadly. But that's when I started keeping the chart. So it's, I'd say, 3 years. Initially, I was very ambitious.
You're still very ambitious.
Yeah, I guess that's likely to stay with me hopefully for a while yet. I had each category that I wanted to address in a daily plan. And I had it hour by hour by hour by hour. It was interesting because it caused me to really learn about various activities and how they could help both pass the time as well as be nourishing in some way. I think as a general matter, the way it's changed over time, over the last 3 years, now going to a fourth year, is that in two ways. Number one, I had to keep an open mind of what works and what doesn't work. Those things that Barbara doesn't want to do, don't push it, is what I have learned. Better that she be happy and comfortable, not that I allow her to do anything that might be endangering or,
of course,
inappropriate. But I've reduced the frequency of events and of change.
Now, are there things that Barbara had enjoyed doing that she no longer enjoys?
Yeah, I think one big one, for example, is cooking or baking, which she...
Oh, she made great cookies.
Yeah, her chocolate chip cookies were famous. No, she's just not interested anymore in that. Helping me organize things, which I felt would be, interesting and useful from a cognitive point of view, not really interested anymore. Then again, there are certain things that were obviously really interesting, and I emphasize them disproportionately now. Music being a big one and an obvious one for people. I think we all come to understand how valuable and important. And with Alexa, it's possible to create different game lists or listening opportunities during the day, which, and I now have it on all day. So we'll listen to the Broadway channel, and then we'll listen to 60s, and then we'll listen to the Beatles channel, and then we'll, have a podcast on that. Even if the podcast may be beyond Barbara's comprehension, she'll listen. She likes having a broadcast. And so I've found that that's been, really important in terms of occupying her in a way that I think nourishes her.
Last week, before we started recording, Barbara was dancing. I'm not sure that I remember music actually playing or whether she was just dancing.
Music would have been playing. And, so for example, in the morning when she gets up, comes downstairs, what do I play? The Beach Boys. And she is dancing, right off. And it's an interesting point because what I've come to understand about her condition is that her memory is gone, for the most part, and her language is also significantly diminished, even though she has lots of words. But what appears to be relatively intact or important is her sense of rhythm. So in her words, I find her words have sort of a staccato. She gets into the rhythm, and the more she speaks, the more she gets into the rhythm. And sometimes she gets so into it that she gets very dramatic, like she's doing a monologue, like she used to do many as an actor. And I think you've seen that. Her friends certainly see it, where she all of a sudden is like Shakespearean, even though it's incoherent.
Oh, she speaks passionately. Yeah.
Similarly, music, dance. She hears music and she dances to the music. Her sense of rhythm is really strong. Relatedly, she loves listening to poetry, so that's become a big part of our routine. Well, it also happens to coincide with my interests, both stuff I'm writing or that I want to read to her, and she would listen for as long as I want to read. So that becomes a significant activity. Spiritual. We have Shabbat, services now by Zoom every Friday night, where she loves listening because the prayers have a rhythm. The words are familiar, and they are provided musically. So it's no surprise to me now, understanding this, that she would enjoy the prayers and the music associated with a spiritual practice, which I have to think also has spiritual benefit to her, just through reciting what she's been reciting for years.
Well, a profound experience for me when we lost our dad almost a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And you had a Shiva service at your house, and Barbara was seemingly essentially as incoherent as she seems now, but she knew the prayers,
Right.
which blew my mind. I didn't know them, but she knew them, and knew them from, her very foundation, which is extraordinary. And I guess it goes to the music too, that she can still remember, and lyrics she can still remember from James Taylor or the Beatles, but
Right.
that the religious prayers are deeply embedded.
Right. So, as far as a game plan and planning activities of normal living, and there's a list of those that you can get from, Alzheimer's Association, of various activities that you want to make sure somebody is doing or has some awareness of, or has a lack of awareness of, which itself is indicative of changing condition. I think the first and foremost is there's no specific recipe that is for everybody. You have to have an open mind. You have to continually see what works. And over time, and this is really goes to the core of the Sharegiver solution, and we'll come to it, those activities should be things, each of them, that is nourishing to and interesting to the sharegiver. So it is really sharing the experience. It's not just putting something, on the record player, for those that still remember those things, and going and doing something else, going away. It is sharing the experience,
Right.
taking
And
the opportunity to grow.
If you're not engaged as the sharegiver, it's not going to have the same effect as if you are sharing.
Yeah, and not just for the person that you're sharing with, your partner, but for yourself.
Right.
So when you ask how
That's where that's the engagement I'm
how
talking
has it
about.
changed over time? And this goes back to our discussions on mindset.
Of course.
If the sharegiver has a growth mindset, that means that he wants to feed his curiosity. He or she wants to be learning, wants to be growing, wants to be developing, which is exciting. And this is what I see as flourishing. You do it by sharing these activities. So the music, so what am I doing now? For example, I'm going through my jazz collection and my classical music collection that I've never really applied any particular organization to, and I'm learning. And Barbara's listening. She's enjoying, but I'm taking stock of and learning about things that I was curious about. What really differentiates Charlie the Bird Parker, and listening to, Mozart's violin concertos, and listening to La Traviata. And, so while I am engaging Barbara in an activity that she has a predisposition towards, I'm nourishing my own interest as well.
Well, and it still, for me, goes back to the issue of being that curious person who wants to not only learn about the disease, about your partner, but learn about yourself, learn ways of expanding your own experience, your own knowledge. Yeah. And again, I'm not sure how you teach curiosity, how you teach the thirst for knowledge, how you teach the desire to be more. But clearly, the greater your desire to be more, the greater the quality of your care.
So I think one important aspect is if you understand that by practicing it, you're going to be happier. By connecting that which may not come naturally to you, or not something you've practiced, but you now understand that it is directly tied to your own sense of competence and accomplishment and awareness and happiness, then you're going to try it out. I mean, other things, for example, with Barbara that have that she is doing with my initiative that align with my interest that she likes, gardening. You know, so we've created a garden outside.
That's an understatement.
We've created a pretty cool garden. I did it because, number one, it involved activity that even if Barbara was still a little reluctant to get her hands dirty, let's face it, but she tags along. And I thought, wow, a garden, that'd be cool because we'll do something additional or different every season, and she'll have a chance to see change and maybe measure it or be aware of it in some way, which would be useful. And then we put paths in it. So, well, you know, for our mom, who's wheelchair bound, but, you know, would enjoy the garden, and other friends that I have, and maybe including ourselves in another 20 years.
Please.
So you can get through the garden. But what am I doing in that garden? I'm running with her. So we jog on this path, and we stop at stones, and we do push-ups on the stone. She sees it now as much a fitness, you know, opportunity as a garden.
Now, I have to say, probably as a warning shot, that I know there was a time that either you've come to prevent or not, that Barbara was pulling flowers out of the garden, pulling the heads off flowers.
Yeah, that's maybe why there are no flowers in this particular garden. And if we ever visit you, anyone in the listening audience, and you have live flowers that you care about, I'd sort of remove them during the visit. Yes. Well, one of the characteristics of, and it's worth talking about, people with dementia often are attracted to objects. They wander. They'll wander inside. They'll wander outside. They'll pick up anything that catches their attention. They'll put it down somewhere else. They might, you know, disfigure it like flowers or like a book or like maybe my favorite book that all of a sudden doesn't have the, you know,
last chapter.
Yeah, or the last chapter. Those are things that, and this is part of mindset. This goes
very
to
much
right?
part of course.
And so when those things happen now, as opposed to originally, when it might happen originally, like that precious, you know, calla lily that you just bought that is now, you know, beheaded. I could have said at one time, "How could you do that?" I don't say that.
Yeah,
I know how she could do it, and it doesn't help. I get upset. She gets upset, and the calla lily is still beheaded.
It's an essential aspect of mindset. And I know, again, as to the flowers, you had told me at the time you started buying plastic flowers.
Correct.
That's I guess that's a workaround.
A horrible thing.
Is that a workaround? Is that a workaround?
So it's a workaround. So yeah, if you're driving past my house and you see all the flower boxes and hanging baskets, they all look beautiful, and they'll look beautiful for 4 seasons, and relatively impervious to, you know, Barbara's snatching hands, or even if they get snatched, which they do, you know, they're more easily replaceable. But so yeah, back to the game plan. We have evolved so that we've evolved away from certain things like learning exercises that I was really excited about. I still am for other caregivers who are dealing with a condition that's, you know, much less advanced than mine, where I do think the idea of spaced retrieval learning, where you can, with very simple numbers, sequence 1, 2, 3, or blocks or pictures, and then recalling them shortly after, stimulates cognition and is fun. We have a harder time now playing games, whether it's pick up sticks or playing with Play-Doh. You know, Barbara doesn't seem to have the same attention for it or interest. But
well, and that kind of goes into my area of films and photographs and things like that, which I know early on are a tangible connection to her life and past, and at this point, I'm sure don't have the same relevance.
Except that, interesting that you say it, we have a big bowl of photographs that, running the risk that they will be torn or stuck together, they are endlessly interesting to Barbara. She is always looking at these photographs, and they're photographs of family and friends. And I still believe a very worthwhile activity is putting together, looking through photo albums and the like. Less interesting than maybe before, but still interesting. And still one of the activities that we do. We look through our wedding album. We look through other family albums. We look through pictures of trips that we've taken. As I say, less salient than maybe before, but still important. So at the end of the day, constructing that game plan with, some real deliberation beforehand, and one that changes over time, is something that is designed to both engage Barbara. It has fewer activities, but more activities that she enjoys, clearly. And they're all activities that I enjoy also, to my advantage, which is really... So it takes us to the other part of game plan, which is really self-care, and which is equally important. The care that I'm providing to my partner, to whom I'm very committed, and obviously have been, I have recognized, and this is in part at the urging of my daughters, that need to make sure I'm taking care of myself, and which means understanding as best I can my condition. So, for example, they made sure that I was getting some help that gave me some respite during the week, which I've done, recognizing that a number of people listening may not even be able to hire somebody, as I've done, for 30 hours a week for 5 days. But it's been extremely helpful, and I went without it for 13 years. Second, they wanted me to go to a shrink. And to any psychiatrists or therapists out there, I don't mean to devalue you by my casual, assigned name to your practice. But so that I could understand my feelings, because they felt that I wasn't really dealing with my feelings. Well, I did go, and I found that it was really interesting and helpful. Even the idea that this psychiatrist, who was great, got me to say out loud that I was lonely. Well, that's not something that I ever really chose to identify to myself. And having done that, he would then say, so what are you going to do about it? And which was another thing my daughter said, which is, Dad, you have to get out. You have to meet people.
Which is another part of mindset and game plan.
And game plan. And networks.
And networks, which we've yet to get into.
Right. So that was hugely important.
So getting back to winning or success, and again, the long-term game plan is just the betterment of your lives and the enrichment of your experience. And I'm interested in the daily winning on a daily basis, and I think that's where Sharegiver Solutions distinguishes itself, is that we will help the sharegiver get through the day well, and the week and the month and the year, and time passes quickly. What would be a successful day? How do you win a day? When do you, at the end of a day, ever think like, wow, that was a great day? And if you do, what would that day have encompassed?
That's an interesting question. I think I do go through that process. And it actually reminds me of one other thing that I should mention about game plan, both in terms of caring for my partner as well as myself, is I keep a journal. And so at the end of the day, even when I'm tired, I reserve some time to just evaluate the day.
Reflect.
And reflect on it and what was important, which is, I think, hugely important because I believe to the extent you see yourself in the middle of your own story, and let's face it, this is a dramatic story.
Yeah.
And my life is different than it was. To the extent I see myself in the middle of that tale that's going to be told someday is still happening, then the more likely I'm going to live it well. I'm more conscious of it. I'm more conscious of my desire to flourish in this life, not just get along. So that also organizes my mind about it. But I would say what determines whether it was a good day or not is reflecting on how I acted, with my partner. Was there a point that, I got upset, which still will happen? Was there something I did that was innovative, that was really cool? I got to do that again, which often is the way we have conversations now, and the way I act as a surrogate for, either myself in the same conversation or Barbara. So, reflect on those things of what worked and also how I feel. And how I feel is often directly connected not just to how it went with Barbara, but what I learned that day, or who I spoke with, or maybe I had lunch with somebody, or even dinner. I sort of have a Thursday night that is sort of in my parallel life, having my own evening where, I have somebody that will stay late. These are things that, make life richer for me.
Well, I know we've spoken about, and it relates to mindset and game plan and networks. The things that, what does success look like for you? What are the things that will make you successful? What are the things that will appear as failures that you'd like to avoid?
Yeah, I think I would say that's worthy of almost a separate podcast
own episode,
in itself.
I'm sure.
But, I would say it all comes from the way we act and the way we guide somebody as a caregiver. All has to be from some sense of purpose. That's sort of an irreducible element. And when we can really identify that and feel it, then it's much easier to think about those things that enable, that are driven by that sense of purpose and enable the success that comes out of that sense of purpose.
And that reminds me of something we've spoken of that I think it's important to mention, and it kind of harkens back to what I've done. And I've worked with many people over the years who are in difficult situations, many of them in debilitating physical situations, PTSD situations, situations of loss. And what I've learned from experts and from having interviewed so many people is that when things are at their darkest and lowest, and arguably this can be one of those situations if you allow it, what I've learned as not necessarily an antidote, but essentially that's what it is understanding that there are a lot of other people in that situation or in worse, more difficult situations that you can help. And that has been embedded in my mind as a way of dealing with trauma, is that other people are suffering and you may be able to help.
Right. It's very
and that's
powerful.
what Sharegiver Solutions wants to do.
Sharing, and I think this is a great point that we can conclude with, but I think it's pretty clear that when you are giving, when you are sharing something, you're feeling better,
Yeah.
Even giving to somebody that you don't like or really pisses you off, you find if you can give something to that person, it almost invariably comes back. It improves it. And one aspect of game plan, to conclude, that I think is of critical importance is part of the game plan is taking care of yourself specifically, that doing those things that would prevent you from getting sick, like the person you're taking care of, which is eating properly and getting exercise and getting restful sleep and managing your stress and nourishing your cognition. These are things that can be
not to mention your emotional state, having conversations.
Right. These are
interactions
things that can be practiced, that are health inducing, that are inflammation reducing, that great boogeyman. And not just taking care of yourself, but as a caregiver, practicing this with others, young people, your kids, your nieces and nephews, again, trying to avoid being too dogmatic about it, but sharing what you now understand is ways to not just live more healthfully for its own sake, but preventing the onset of these kind of disabilities. And so I think there is something really powerful about caregiving that turns you into somebody that's taking care of yourself and also being a great advocate for others. Well, that should be part of the game plan.
Yeah, well, 2 words, one you've mentioned, one we haven't really spoken about, are passion and purpose. Purpose is a powerful, powerful force, and passion is what we all strive to empower ourselves with and convey to others. So passion and purpose.
Reminds me of a boss I once had that said the 3 P's were really important: passion, purpose, and getting paid. But anyway.
Well, there are a lot of different forms of compensation.
Correct.
Gratification, certainly one of them.
Correct.
Feeling good about yourself.
Sense of accomplishment. Happiness.
Yeah. Happiness. Well, let's leave it there.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next week.
So long.